Barry Pepper is lying in the sand on Omaha Beach. His face is pressed against the stock of a bolt-action rifle, blood and salt water streaking down his cheek. He whispers a line from Psalms, steadies his breathing, and sends a round downrange that drops a German machine gunner from 300 yards. It is one of the most unforgettable moments in cinema history, and the rifle in his hands is wrong. Not a little wrong. Not a minor historical inaccuracy that only a gun nerd would catch. Wrong in every single scene of the film, in ways that reveal something much more uncomfortable than a Hollywood prop mistake. Because Private Daniel Jackson's sniper rifle tells a story that Steven Spielberg never intended to tell. A story about how the most powerful military on Earth sent its soldiers into the largest amphibious invasion in history without a sniper program, without proper sniper rifles, and without any real understanding of what a sniper was supposed to do. But before we get to that, we need to talk about what is actually sitting on top of that Springfield. If you enjoy stories like this, where film meets real weapons history, like the video, subscribe, and comment on what movie you want me to cover next. Because what was wrong with Jackson's rifle says a lot about the army that issued it. When Jackson first appears on the beach at Normandy, his rifle is an M1903A4 Springfield. That part is accurate. The Springfield was the standard issue sniper platform for the United States Army during World War II. But the scope mounted on top of it is a Lyman Alaskan. That is the first problem. The Lyman Alaskan was originally the Army's first choice for the M1903A4. Ordnance officials designated it the M73 and wanted it as the standard sniper optic. But Lyman could not meet production demands. They simply could not manufacture enough scopes fast enough, so the Army pivoted to a cheaper alternative, the Weaver 330C hunting scope. That Weaver scope, later standardized as the M73B1, is what actually sat on top of every M1903A4 that rolled off the Remington assembly line during the war. So the Lyman Alaskan on Jackson's rifle at Normandy should not be there. It was the scope the Army wanted but never got in sufficient numbers. But here is where things get really interesting. Later in the film, when Jackson settles into the bell tower in the French village of Neuville for a sniper duel against a German marksman, his scope changes. The Lyman Alaskan is gone. In its place sits a much longer, much more powerful unertl scope. Now, if you watch carefully, the film actually shows Jackson reaching behind his back and opening a cylindrical carrying case, and there is a brief shot of him removing the shorter scope and mounting the longer one. Spielberg's team clearly thought about this. They tried to make it look plausible. It is not plausible. The unertl scope was manufactured exclusively for the United States Marine Corps. It was a completely different optical system with a completely different mounting base. The unertl used external adjustment knobs and sat on its own proprietary rail system that had nothing in common with the Redfield base drilled and tapped into the M1903A4 receiver. You could not swap a unertl scope onto an Army Springfield in the field, not without a different set of mounting rings, a different base, and a set of gunsmithing tools that no infantryman would be carrying through the hedgerows of Normandy. The two systems are mechanically incompatible. Putting a Marine unertl on an Army Springfield in a bombed-out church tower is like trying to bolt a Ferrari engine into a Ford pickup using nothing but a Leatherman. And there is another problem with that bell tower scene that gun enthusiasts have been arguing about for almost 3 decades. Jackson fires 8 shots in rapid succession from his Springfield without reloading. The M1903A4 holds 5 rounds. 5. And because the scope sits directly over the action, you cannot use a stripper clip to reload. Each round has to be fed individually, one at a time, into the magazine. That is a slow, deliberate process. Not exactly something you can do while quoting scripture and picking off targets through a narrow window. But the scene everyone remembers most, the one that made Private Jackson a legend, is the scope shot. Jackson spots the glint of a German sniper's scope across the village. He fires a single round that travels through the German's optic, through all the glass inside, and kills the man behind it. it looks incredible on film, and it is directly borrowed from one of the most famous sniper stories in military history. The real scope shot belongs to Gunnery Sergeant Hathcock, Carlos Hathcock, a Marine Corps sniper operating near Hill 55 in Vietnam more than 2 decades after World War II. Hathcock and his spotter, John Roland Burke, were hunting an enemy sniper known only as the Cobra, a marksman who had already killed several Marines and was believed to have been sent specifically to kill Hathcock himself. The two snipers stalked each other through the jungle for days. At one point, Hathcock tripped over a decayed log, and the Cobra's bullet missed his head and punched through his spotter's canteen instead. They kept moving. Eventually, the two teams had completely switched positions, and the Cobra made a fatal mistake. He ended up facing the sun. Hathcock saw a glint of light in the foliage. He fired at it. The round went straight through the Cobra's rifle scope, through the lenses, and into the sniper's eye. It is one of the most legendary kills in military history. But here's the thing Saving Private Ryan conveniently ignores. Hathcock was a Marine, not the Army. He used a Winchester Model 70 with an 8-power Unertl scope, not a Springfield with a 2.5 power Weaver scope. He was significantly closer to his target than the roughly 400 yards depicted in the film. And most critically, the optics of the Vietnam era were far simpler than modern scopes. When Mythbusters tested the claim using period-accurate Vietnamese optics with fewer internal lens elements, they found the shot was plausible. But with the multiple glass elements found in later scopes, the bullet could not penetrate all the way through. At 400 yards, with the kind of scope a German sniper would have been using in 1944, the bullet drop alone would make it nearly impossible to thread a round cleanly through every lens in the tube. Hathcock pulled it off because he was closer, shooting slightly downhill, and his target scope had a simpler internal construction. Jackson's version of the shot makes for better cinema, but it does not make for good history. And this is where the story of Private Jackson's rifle stops being about Hollywood goofs and starts being about something much more important. Because the real scandal is not what Spielberg got wrong about the gun. It is what he got wrong about the institution behind it. When the United States entered World War II, the Soviet Union had roughly 60,000 trained snipers in active service. The Germans, after being devastated by those Soviet marksmen on the Eastern Front, had rushed a comprehensive sniper training program into existence by 1943. The British, after fumbling through the early war years, had rebuilt their sniper schools and were producing capable teams by the time of the Normandy invasion. The United States Army had no formal sniper program, none. There was no standardized training doctrine. There was no sniper school. There was no systematic process for selecting, equipping, or deploying snipers. Senior American commanders simply never adopted a centralized program, despite mounting evidence from every theater that enemy snipers were killing their men at an alarming rate. What happened instead was haphazard and improvised. A handful of individual commanders, seeing the need firsthand, created their own ad hoc training courses behind the lines. Colonel Sidney Hines of the 41st Armored Infantry Regiment set up a 5-week course in Tunisia and graduated a small number of snipers, but these were isolated efforts. Where commanders took no interest, nothing was done. The typical American sniper in World War II was essentially created when a sergeant walked up to a good shot, handed him a scoped Springfield, and told him, "You are the sniper now." That Springfield was the M1903A4. And the M1903A4, to put it bluntly, was not a great sniper rifle. Colonel Brophy, whose definitive history of the Springfield series remains the standard reference, described the M1903A4 as at best a poor excuse for a sniper rifle. And when you look at how it was made, you understand why. The rifle was born from the M1903A3, a simplified, cost-reduced version of the original Springfield, designed to speed wartime production. The A4 sniper variant was standardized in January 1943 and built entirely by Remington Arms. About 28,000 were produced over roughly 2 years. Here is what made it a sniper rifle. They removed the iron sights. They drilled and tapped the receiver for a Redfield scope mount. They bolted on a Weaver 330C scope. That is the entire conversion. The rifles were not hand-selected for accuracy. They were not carefully assembled by armorers. They were standard production rifles, pulled right off the line with a scope slapped on top. Each one cost the government approximately $64. By comparison, the Marine Corps built their sniper rifles from hand-selected M1903A4 National Match Actions, carefully fitted by armorers who understood precision shooting. The Weaver scope itself was a commercial hunting optic adapted for military use. It offered 2.5 times magnification in a narrow tube. The field of view was limited. The optic was not waterproof. In the humid, rain-soaked hedgerow country of Normandy, these scopes regularly fogged over or became waterlogged. Soldiers described looking through them as being like peering through a drinking straw, and because the iron sights had been removed to make room for the scope mount, when that scope fogged up or took a hit, the sniper was left with a bolt-action rifle he could not aim. No backup, no fallback, just a long gun with a useless tube on top. The Germans, meanwhile, kept iron sights on their scoped Kar 98K rifles. Many of their scope mounts were quick, detachable, allowing a sniper to remove a damaged optic and immediately revert to iron sights. The Americans did not think to do this. When American troops landed in Normandy, they walked straight into the most effective sniper threat they had ever encountered. German snipers, many of them trained specifically to counter the Soviet marksmen who had been killing their officers for 3 years, exploited the dense bocage hedgerow terrain to devastating effect. They encircled American units and fired from multiple directions. They could approach to terrifyingly close range without being detected, and the Americans, who had excellent marksmanship skills but almost no fieldcraft training, were caught flat-footed. The gap between how well an American soldier could shoot and how well he understood the tactical arts of sniping was enormous. They could hit targets on a range. They did not know how to stalk, how to build a hide, how to read terrain for firing positions, or how to withdraw after taking a shot. The German snipers exploited this gap mercilessly. This is the truth that Private Jackson's fictional sniper rifle papers over. Hollywood gave us a man who could swap scopes in a church tower, fire 8 rounds from a 5-round magazine, and shoot a man through his own optic from 400 yards. A superhuman warrior with a magical gun. The reality was an 18-year-old kid from Tennessee or Oklahoma, handed a $64 rifle with a fogging scope, told he was the unit sniper, given no formal training in how to do the job, and sent into hedgerow country against men who had been drilling sniper tactics for 3 years. That kid was not Private Jackson. He was not quoting Psalms. He was terrified, poorly equipped, and making it up as he went. And many of those kids did not come home. The Springfield M1903A4 was not a great rifle, but it was the rifle America had when it needed one, and the men who carried it into the bocage, into the frozen forests of the Ardennes, into the rubble of German cities, did the best they could with what their country gave them, which was not enough. The real legacy of the Springfield sniper rifle is not the one Hollywood tells. It is not a story about a perfect shot from a bell tower. It is a story about institutional failure and individual courage, about an army that did not take sniping seriously until its soldiers paid for that arrogance in blood. It took until the Vietnam War for the United States to begin building a real sniper program. The man most responsible for that program was a skinny kid from Arkansas who grew up hunting with a war surplus Mauser his father brought home from Europe. Carlos Hathcock enlisted in the Marines on his 17th birthday. He won the prestigious Wimbledon Cup long-range shooting competition in 1965. A year later, he deployed to Vietnam, where he would accumulate 93 confirmed kills and an estimated 300 more that were never officially verified. He wore a white feather in his bush hat, openly taunting the enemy to come find him. The North Vietnamese put a $30,000 bounty on his head. Multiple sniper teams were sent to kill him, none of them collected, and the weapon Hathcock carried was not a Springfield M1903A4. It was a Winchester Model 70, a commercial hunting rifle that the Marines considered superior to anything the military had officially fielded. That is how bad the Army sniper rifle situation was. The greatest American sniper of the Vietnam era preferred a gun you could buy at a sporting goods store. Hathcock's second tour ended on September 16, 1969, when the armored vehicle he was riding struck a 500-pound mine. He was covered in burning gasoline. He went back into the vehicle 7 times and pulled 7 Marines out before collapsing with burns over nearly half his body. He was recommended for the Medal of Honor. He refused it. 27 years later, they gave him a Silver Star instead. After recovering, Hathcock spent the rest of his career building what the Army should have built decades earlier. He helped establish the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico. He helped design the curriculum. He took everything he learned in the jungle, the stalking, the fieldcraft, the patience, the psychological discipline, and turned it into formal doctrine. The modern American sniper program, the one that produced Chris Kyle, the one that deployed precision teams across Iraq and Afghanistan, the one that routinely makes shots the men of World War II could only dream about, exists in large part because Carlos Hathcock survived that burning vehicle and lived long enough to teach what he knew. He died of multiple sclerosis on February 22nd, 1999. He was 56 years old. So the next time you watch Private Jackson pray over his Springfield in Saving Private Ryan, remember what you are actually looking at. Not a perfect weapon in the hands of a perfect soldier, but a deeply flawed rifle that represents a deeper institutional failure carried by real men who deserve better, and whose sacrifice eventually built something that did not exist and then exists when they needed it most. The gun was never the point. The man behind it was. And the men who actually carried these rifles into World War II with their fogging scopes and their empty 5-round magazines and their complete lack of formal training were braver than any character Hollywood ever wrote, because Private Jackson had a script. They did not. If you found this interesting, hit subscribe. I cover the real stories behind famous weapons every week, and if you want to know about another rifle Hollywood got completely wrong, that video is on screen now.